Hi, Charmaine. I hope I got that right. I wanted to leave you some comments here on your discussion post, discussion two here in week one. And this is, of course, talking about collective action and common pool resources, privatization, rivalry, and excludability. So I just want to get to your post. Um, it's good that you brought the text in because I think that some of these concepts are not really easy to understand. For example, we know what rivals are in sports or something else, but when we're talking about environmental policy, we're really talking about an economic concept known as rivalry and non-rivalry. But to get to your first part, the first part of the post, you're absolutely right. An aquifer is just groundwater, and underground in many places we just have these large bodies of water where people can extract water from the ground by digging a well or something like that. So our groundwater is stored in aquifers wherever the rock is porous enough for that to happen. And you're right that really it needs to be managed by collective action. And the reason it has to be managed by collective action is because it's rival in consumption, but it is not excludable. So let me explain that a little bit. Water in general as a resource, drinking water, is rival because if I take out 100 gallons from the ground, that's 100 gallons that somebody else can't use. And for any resource that's sort of limited, rivalry is usually applied. So it's called rival in consumption, and that means that when I'm using it, it's going to mean that there's less of it for you. And aquifers generally are not excludable because they're so big in a lot of cases. An aquifer could cover hundreds of square miles. It could be underneath an entire city, an entire valley. And so when you have people that own land on an aquifer, there might be hundreds to thousands of people that own a piece of land on the aquifer. And if any of them want to drill a well, they pretty much can, and you can't keep them out of the aquifer because, well, that's their property, really. So you have this this resource that is rival in consumption and non-excludable. So since you can't exclude people from it, you can't really make it private. The best thing to do in this case is manage it through collective action. And you manage it through collective action by creating an agreement or laws or regulations or something so that all of the people that have access to that resource don't use it all up. And so that's that. Looking at the rest of the post, the polluter pays principle is pretty easy for most of us to understand. It just generally means that anybody that pollutes is ethically, responsible for cleaning it up or paying to have it cleaned up. This is perhaps one of the reasons that we're so offended by litter bugs, because they pollute all over the place and don't pay to clean it up, and most of us see that as very unethical. But the polluter pays principle applies to companies and oil spills, and in other situations like fracking, if there's damage to the environment or dust from a construction site, we generally feel that, ethically speaking, whoever pollutes needs to clean it up or needs to pay for it. So that's about it. Those are the only comments I have. You talk about international waste disposal in navigable waters, the ocean, and that sort of thing. It could be a problem. It could be a problem if the aquifer crosses international borders, for sure. You're talking a little bit about greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas in general doesn't really affect aquifers because aquifers are kind of deep underground. and they store rainwater or snow melt. But greenhouse gas definitely has its own set of problems, and we're going to be talking about that more in the unit on climate change in the next couple of weeks. And then you say people should be held accountable for their actions in order to protect the aquifers. And I agree, and the polluter pays principle would apply. Anybody that spills petroleum into an aquifer should have to pay to clean that up. But in a lot of cases, that's not really possible. Let's give you an example. Here in San Diego, we have an aquifer in a river valley, a watershed, and this chemical company, petroleum fill station, had leaky tanks, and the tanks leaked chemicals into the aquifer. Well, the company was fined, and they just went out of business. So now there's nobody really to clean it up. And the company went out of business. So in that case, who's supposed to pay to clean up the pollution? Well, it's a good thing that in the United States we have what's called the Superfund, which is a government-sponsored fund for cleaning up disaster areas once there's nobody left to be accountable for it. But that's about it. Good job with the reference. It's always a good idea to put a reference in there so that you demonstrate that you have scholarly support in your posts. So if you have any other questions, let me know. Thanks.